Welcome back, y'all, to another episode of Spittin Hoops with a brand new guest, another episode, another guest. And today we have Rudy, the Bulls expert. Rudy, how are you feeling?
How do I feel about being on the podcast? I feel great. I want to say thanks for inviting me on here. It feels good to be part of Spittin Hoops.
Yeah, we'll cut that out. We'll cut that out.
Not quite as positive about the direction of the Bulls franchise right now.
Yeah, I mean, understandable. We'll have a lot to discuss. Bulls story franchise, but obviously struggling lately. Last season, no different. 40 and 42, 10th seed in the regular season. Win your playing game against Toronto, lose the playing game against Miami, who goes on to be in the NBA Finals. Crazy world we live in. Alex Russo for CML defense. You guys had some rough stretches at the beginning of the season, 11 and 18 to start off the season. 6-game losing streak before the All-Star break, but overall ended the season 30 and 23, which would have been a winning percentage that would have put you guys in the top 5 seeding over the course of the full season. So overall, I mean, unfortunate given the streaks, but like the high points were pretty good.
Yeah, once I think the Bulls we had a sort of identity as a team. I think when Arturas Karnisovas, I don't know if I'm saying that name right, I don't think I ever have, but I think when he came in 2020, the dominant sort of model for winning in the NBA was you either look like Golden State or you have LeBron James on your team, right? So he was like, okay, I'm going to design my team around beating Golden State. Right, it's impossible to sort of plan around beating LeBron because it's LeBron, especially at the time. But he designed the team around that, and we were, our identity was we're gonna kick your ass in the backcourt. Right, we got Alonzo Ball, we got Alex Caruso. They were our guys that were like absolute dogs in the backcourt. Teams like guards hated playing against the Bulls. It was no matter what you did, your guards were going to be tired even when they were on offense, when they were on defense. When we had those two guys in the backcourt, we could not be we were so much better. There was a time in 2021 before Alonzo got injured. We were at the top of the East. All right. We were serious contenders, not just like a good team that is definitely going to make the playoffs. We were like actual contenders. Obviously our team is much different from that point 2 years ago. But the team was designed around having these two guys hound your guards in the backcourt, and then no one having enough energy to guard Zach LaVine, who is one of the best athletes in the NBA. Plus, we had DeMar, who is, he might be sort of a remnant of a past NBA, but he is he's still a lights out mid range shooter, and he's fun to watch, but statistically is not always the best shot you want, even how he does it. But
yeah, I mean, flowing off that Lonzo point, I mean, we saw it this season. It's just been patchwork since then to try to replace kind of that defensive presence and then seeing whatever like that player can give you on the offensive end. Like Patrick Beverley at the deadline, that was like the boost, right? It's Patrick Beverley.
Was a boost. Yeah, that was honestly, I was like, what are we doing getting Patrick Beverley? It doesn't make any sense. And then sort of once he started playing, I realized how he fit into the game plan. I like Kobe White and I like Ayo DeSonmo, but they're still young. They haven't really quite developed that ability to play defense physically. Kobe White is still like pretty mid defensively. And neither of them are really like that good enough of leaders and like have the right energy to like lead the team. Patrick Beverley, I was shocked by how good he was. I would have loved to have him on our team again this year. I think that the Sixers getting him for, what is he going to pay, like $3 million there?
Yeah, a minimum contract of some sort.
Oh my God, I would have paid him that in a heartbeat to stay in Chicago. I would have paid him double that. I think that he was like sort of a missing piece. We were never going to be contenders with him, but you can see sort of when he came onto the team where the team like could have been had we had the right personnel. But since Lonzo's injury, like we really have not been the same. He was a great scorer, a great playmaker, and like most importantly, he was a phenomenal defender.
No, definitely. And like to that point, I thought last year also there was something interesting going on, right? Like going into that season, like, you're expecting Ayo or like Kobe White to kind of take the reins of that point guard role, not to dwell on this point guard point. Not to dwell on this point guard point too much. Important. Yeah, it's the only missing piece. And it's like at the beginning of the season, it was like Goran. So it's like, okay, Goran, this is an offensive guy. Let's see if he works. And it's like, realistically, that's the thing about Lonzo that's so difficult to like ever replace. Like that mold of player is also so rare, like a 3-and-D point guard, if that makes any sense. Like
Yeah.
those guys don't really exist. It's like Chris Paul, like a few years ago, right? It was like the like I don't
Yeah.
even know. Like Lonzo's just way more athletic than that, and like probably better
Yeah, even
defensively.
Lonzo's better at defense than he sort of ever was.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm really not even confident Lonzo's ever going to play in the NBA again. I was an Ohio State fan. I've been an Ohio State fan for a long time. I remember what happened to Greg Oden. The
Mm.
man, he would have been a Hall of Famer undeniably
Mm-hmm.
if he didn't have this knee problem. And I'm not convinced that Lonzo isn't in the same boat of this knee thing. He is looking better, you know what I mean? He's able to walk without like limping, which is a good sign, but it's not,
He
it
can
can be.
sit. He can stand up and sit down in a chair and then get into an argument with Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. I can't believe that.
Dude, that was hilarious. I mean, he kind of showed up Stephen A, but it was like
I think
Steve,
Stephen A was speaking extemporaneously, and Lonzo took the bait, and
yeah,
just doing that means nothing. And obviously, Stephen A laughed at that because it's ridiculous. The fact that that's what we're celebrating over is that you can stand up and down on one leg.
Nah, I mean, it's true. But so you guys finish up. You guys have a fire. Honestly, one of the most legendary playing games. It's a new playing is new, but one of the most legendary playing games I can remember. Shout out DeAr DeRozan, absolutely screaming at the top of her lungs,
Stunning.
and they brick 18 of 36 from the free throw line. How was that experience?
It felt so good. Like I remember that was all over Twitter the next day, but I remember seeing her like yelling. I'm like, oh my God. And they missed. And, I knew we could have beaten them, and I would have liked to see a little bit better. At the end of the day, Miami was a much better team than the 8 seed. Obviously, we know that they went on to play in the finals. So I really have no qualms. We were never going to be able to beat Miami. It may be like 1 in 100 kind of game, but yeah, there was not a doubt in my mind that we should have beaten the Raptors and we weren't going to beat Miami.
that was a pretty close game though too. That was what's almost even like more shocking about it is like that game it like came within 10. Like it didn't feel like it was just like
It was close.
yeah, like close, like Miami's still in control type close.
We
Kind
got
of
work in the digits.
yeah, kind low key kind of just every Miami game all playoffs like they kind of get a lead and they hold on to it or like some or the opposite, so
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
then Jimmy just goes like he zones in and he's just a fucking second coming of Michael Jordan out there.
Literally. Well, okay. Overall, that wraps up the season, I guess. You guys end up losing 6 more games than you guys did in 2021-22. And that's kind of despite a fully healthy year from Pat Williams, which we didn't have the year before.
Right.
And then the big three also played more games together this year than they did the
Yeah.
season before. So it's kind of not
The
really
big three.
yeah, the big three. I just like using that
I don't
term.
We're more of a complete team than like a big three kind of team,
Absolutely. Yeah, and I definitely agree. And like to that point, I feel like you guys made some moves where it was kind of like just gonna reinforce the fringes, and it's like kind of the core 6, 7 guys we're not gonna touch. Which
Oh.
management got a lot of pushback on that in the middle of last season because I remember when they had the press conference, they're like, we were good on we did our due diligence and we were good on all the moves, and they decided to do nothing. But again, you guys, although you do nothing, quote unquote, these are a lot of good players that come in. Javon Carter, Torrey Craig, Julian Phillips, who comes in the second round of the draft. Like there's pieces.
I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say about Julian Phillips. But our last few draft picks, I mean, I think Ayo DeSunmo and Kobe have been, I guess, about as good as you can expect. They're not like game-changing players, but they fill their role pretty well. Torrey Craig, I don't. It just doesn't get me excited. You know what I mean?
It's like he's playing 15 minutes.
But Patrick Williams, I do think, has the makings of what could be a very, very good player, even possibly defensive all team, or even like third team All NBA kind of thing. Maybe at a better point in his career. He's a big guy. Mm-hmm. He's 6'8", 6'9", but he's got like incredible athleticism. His shot's been getting better. He seems like he plays a little reservedly. I remember when he was drafted. What was it? It was like he talked about in the draft thing, like, oh, my mom ran like a flower shop or anything, or something like that. And I can't stop thinking about that. I'm like, dude, why are you talking about the flower shop? Like, you sound kind of soft. And I would like to see him play a little. I don't know, like he plays like aggressively when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, but like I want to see him play aggressively with the ball in his hands. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Patrick Williams, pretty consistent, like 10-4 kind of guy. And you just want to see those numbers get elevated a little bit. I mean, I fully see that. He plays a little bit conservatively, but he has the frame. He could be a great 3-and-D kind of player.
No, he's not a 3-and-D kind of player. That's not him at all. He's a rebounder. I could see him being a 10-10 kind of guy, or 15-8 kind of guy.
I kind of agree. He's like miscast as a 3-and-D guy. He's like almost too big for that role, I feel like now. And
he's way too big. He's the guy. He's the guy who guards Giannis when we play him. You know what I mean? He's the guy that guards LeBron. He's our like big guy that's not like the center or the guy who's grabbing all the rebounds or clogging up the paint. But he doesn't play that 3-and-D role really. He's great at defense, don't get me wrong, but he's not really a 3-point shooter.
I mean, he shoots well percentage wise, but he takes like 3 a game. Like I think he shoots 40+%. But if you're taking 3, I mean, you're really just you're not confident in that shot. Probably the thing is, if that number goes up, now we're talking about a thoroughly solid defensive player in the paint, on the perimeter, etc. But also now a guy who can score, and that's going to take his game to like a whole nother level potentially.
Yeah,
like, I think that's the hope.
Right now, his sort of scoring potential is almost as like a rim runner kind of guy, because he's bigger and he can like take a lob, and he's got good hand eye. He just needs. I think it's a confidence thing, and that's one of there are a few things that can change in the NBA. Maturity doesn't come to everyone, but confidence is something that you can develop over years. And he's a young guy. I think he'll get there.
Do we have any feelings about Alex Caruso? I guess we're not at the questions and hot take section, but at least this year, like Alex Caruso, do we have I assume positive feelings, but like
I feel very good about Alex Caruso. I think for $9.5 million, I think that's one of the best deals in the NBA. I can't believe the Lakers didn't offer him that same amount or even slightly less. He's like, yeah, I would have stayed if they'd offered me even like a little bit less. I'm like, we got him for a deal, and he's been phenomenal for us. He provides the hustle. He's a decent scorer. I think there are no downsides to him right now.
Definitely. I agree with that.
He could be a good trade piece, even. You know what I mean? But there's not really. I don't know. Right now, the team is not. 2 years ago, it was where we want it to be, but we're a different team 2 years down now. DeMar is getting older. Vucevic is getting older. Yes, Zach LaVine, I think, is in his prime right now. He finally learned how to play some defense. When he does play defense, he's not that like electric transition player that we see. You know what I mean? He gets tired out a little bit from it. And that's why we needed Lonzo Ball, who can be that number one defender and still allow Zach to do his thing and be like that electric scorer, that supermax player that we need him to be on offense.
Definitely.
Well, it's tough because, I mean, when you think of Lonzo, he might not be the best guy on the Bulls, like by his name, but he easily on any night is the most valuable player for that team. I think of like Chris Paul and James Harden on the 2018 Rockets, where James Harden, best player on the team, Chris Paul, most valuable player on the team, in my opinion. That's a guy who can really get everything orchestrated. Fully agree with your points about like the backcourt just being defensive, locking down everybody and setting an identity. Then you guys have a tone. You guys have a vision for the future with Lonzo in your sights. So who knows? Hopefully, maybe he's back in a year or so. But it's tough.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy. The issue is that that was the dominant narrative when Golden State was winning and when LeBron was winning every year. Now I think the league has sort of come back down to earth and realized that neither of those are really sustainable models. Is you need your superstar point guard and you need your superstar big man. And the Raptors obviously don't really fit that mold, but the Raptors never should have won that year anyway. If
Oh,
Golden State was never, if they never had the injuries they did, they never would have won.
I agree with that.
Yeah, there's not a doubt in my mind. So now sort of the dominant take of the NBA's changed. You know, if the Bulls are built around beating Golden State, that's not really quite as relevant anymore. You know, Nikola Vucevic cannot guard Nikola Jokic. He can't guard Joel Embiid. He definitely can't guard Giannis. You know what I mean? And few can, but I think the best way to guard Giannis is, you know, with like a team defense. Like the Celtics guard him exceptionally well. You know, they double him when they need to. They sort of play a box and one at times, and he can't get into the paint on them because they're so well coached in that regard.
I mean, it would be nice, like, if you could upgrade that Vucevic spot, right? Like, but at some point, like, this is like almost like an existential NBA question, but like, if Vucevic is your third best guy, like, is that enough talent on the team too? Like, at some point, like, you're kind of at a spot where, like, I don't know if at any point in Vucevic's career he could have been the third best guy on like a top three team, you know? But then
I think he could have at a better point in his career. And I think that what we have for him now is $18 million. I give him that any day of the week. I think that's not a bad deal because, you know, those big centers who he's still a decent shooter. He's not as good as he used to be, and I would like to see him improve in that regard. But I think for $18 million a year, that's about as good as you're going to get. You know what I mean?
well, yeah, it is, but 3 years left on the deal. That's an extension it's kicking in next year. So you guys have him until what, 2027?
Yeah.
That's kind of getting up there in big man years, but he also has that game that's he's not gonna just drop off like a cliff like
Right.
next year, right?
His game is very conducive to
Yeah.
being old in the first place. You know,
Definitely.
like Jokic could play for another 20 years with his game.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's move on. So that's a good review, I feel like. Let's move on to like some predictions slash previewing next season. Let's start with like, you know, we'll start with the roses. Best case scenario. Anthony, we'll start with you.
best case scenario. So best case scenarios are kind of, this is a weird one. Like this is the first one where I've had like a best and worst kind of happening at the same time because I feel like you go in a couple directions. As the team is, best case scenario, you hear some good news about Lonzo, some updated technology happens, and that knee kind of gets cleaned up a little bit. And then it's like, ooh, we have whispers like coming, you know, in February, March, April. I think best case scenario is you guys actually make it past the play-in. You make it in as a 6 seed. You lose in the first round, unfortunately. And then you decide, okay, you know what? We've had enough. DeMar showed out in the first round. Zach showed out in the first round. Let's blow it up. We need to reroute. I think you guys have one good last final hurrah, and then you kind of circle back to, okay, what do we do here? Because I do think, unfortunately, those are a middling team, and right now they're kind of treading water. And so that's where I think your best case scenario goes at. You have a good season, and then you're all right. Let's redo this thing.
Yeah. What about you, Max? What do you think your best
honestly, like this is like a two-pronged best scenario. Like given this team, like if we're gonna take this team as like at face value, like the idea would be the best case scenario is that they don't blow it up. They end up maybe like 45-37, and then one of the starting point guards or one of the starting potential point guards like Javon Carter, Kobe White, etc. One of them takes like a jump of some sort, right? Like that's the best case scenario. But like my true best case scenario is they just blow it up at the deadline. I mean, even if that all went perfectly and you guys ended up 45-37, where are we? Like I'm also not factoring in Lonzo at all. At any point in any of this, I'm just taking Lonzo as a loss right now, just because I don't think it's fair to put that expectation. He hasn't played in a year and a half, 2 years. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think probably the best case scenario would be blowing it up now while all these guys still have tons of value. Yeah.
There's still a lot of value here, undeniably. I don't think they haven't ruled Lonzo out for the year yet. I think best case scenario is that he does come back. But at that point in the season, are we really good enough to even sort of be in playoff contention? And I think the answer is no. I think Kobe White is past the point where he's going to make a big jump. You know what I mean? I think he could be a good shooting guard on a team that, when we do need shooters. So, I mean, who doesn't need a shooter these days?
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's reasonable to assume that any of these guards are going to make like an enormous jump to be that person that we need them to be in order to like be good. If a team goes 45-37, and that team is old, they have a lot of big contracts on right now, that's not where you want to be. If a team goes 45-37 and your average age is below 25 amongst your starters, that's exactly where you want to be. We can be contenders next year or the year after that. Frankly, I don't even know where to go from this point. I'm pretty disillusioned by even if we had Lonzo, we're still 35 million over the cap. We'd be a good team. Don't get me wrong. I think we'd be a 4 or 5 seed, but I don't think we would not be a 4, 5, 6 maybe, but we would not be like actual contenders. I think that I love DeMar. I think he's a great guy. I don't think he'll ever be on a championship team in his career. He's playing a position that is not. It's a dated position, unfortunately. You know what I mean? He's not physically dominant. He's not. He doesn't have that 40%, 38% 3-point shot. Yeah, he's great from the mid range, but I think that paying a player $30 million a year to sort of he's not taking up space. You know what I mean? He's definitely contributing, but he's not contributing enough at that point. I don't know when his contract is up, but it's sad to say. I mean, I would keep him if we could keep him on for like 10 or 15 million, but at this point, it's he's not worth $30 million a year. Best case scenario is we re-sign him for much less. We see some improvement from maybe all of our players, all of our young guys, because we have Kobe White, we got Ayo DeSomo, Javon Carter, Patrick Williams. I would like to keep Patrick Williams, and Patrick Williams sort of fill the hole of DeMar. We'd have Zach at shooting guard. Lonzo, maybe he comes back at the end of the season and shows that he can still play without getting injured. And he sort of becomes our point guard. We got him at the point. We got Levine as a great scorer at shooting guard. We got Patrick Williams at small forward. I would even keep Vooch on it. He's got that big contract. I don't know if people would really want him. He's fine to keep at center if we get like a really good power forward. Someone who's I've wanted on the Bulls for a long time is from Chicago, who has mentioned he would like to play for the Bulls at some point in his career, is Anthony Davis. Fit into that. And if we have Zach and Lonzo and before Lonzo got injured, he improved his 3-point shot so much. Before he was like 30%, 32% maybe. After the All-Star break, he was shooting like 40%. He would just pull up and take the shot. He had the confidence to do it. If we have him and Zach as our backcourt, we don't even need that lockdown defense. Hopefully we'd still have Caruso to come off the bench. But we don't need to sort of conform to that team that's molded to beat Golden State anymore, because Golden State is not the team to beat anymore.
Do you think then like the inherent issue is just like you don't have one of these top end guys? Like as much as like we like Levine or we might like DeRozan, it's just like none of these guys are an A+ or even an A- potential scoring option or scoring option.
Sort of.
Yes, but
sort of brings into the question of what does a max deal player look like in the NBA, right? We know there's one best player, and it doesn't matter who it is, right? But there's one best player, and that player gets a super max, right?
Stephen Curry. Yeah. No,
probably not, but neither here nor there. That player gets a super max deal. There has to be a certain threshold. That second player can't get a lesser deal. There has to be a threshold where everyone above this line is getting that max deal, right? And if you look at players, here, I pulled this up beforehand. If you look at players who is making more money than Zach LaVine, you got Jokic, Curry, Embiid, Beal, LeBron, Jimmy Butler, Kevin Durant, Giannis, Paul George, Kawhi, Damian Lillard. all those players are better than Zach, right? Players that are making the same amount, Luka and Trae Young. I would take Zach over Trae Young.
I might take Zach over Beal, maybe.
Over Beal.
Yeah.
Possibly. I think he's improved enough on defense to the point. And considering
also
how
plays more
Beal is outlandish. But if you look everyone below Zach, it's Fred VanVleet, Rudy Gobert, Kyrie Irving, Darius Garland, Ja Morant, Zion, Anthony Davis. Like there are a few players that might be better than him, but he's only making like 4 or 5 million more than those guys. And he's better than most of them. So I think that the question is, do you need like that top 5 player to win in the NBA? Let's take a look at our past few winners. They've all had, Kawhi was on that Raptors team. I would argue that even at that point, he was a top 5, undeniably.
Yeah.
He still was the best. He tried.
I thought he was the best low key.
Yeah, I don't think that's a hot take. He was so good he was the best defender and arguably one of the best offenders. But like Jokic, Giannis, LeBron, yeah, I think you're right in a sense that you do need one of those top 5. The last team to win without like a top 10 player in
Detroit,
the 2004. Yeah.
Detroit.
What? Pistons?
Yep.
Yeah. And everything went perfect for them, and they had an amazing defense.
Yeah. These were all, they basically had like 5 guys who were like between 10 and 25 and if you were gonna
that's what you need. Yeah,
so at some point
Ben Wallace, Chauncey Billups, Rip,
they had Rip, and then Tayshaun,
Tayshaun Prince, yeah. I don't know, did the Spurs ever win without Tim Duncan?
No.
I think the thing is, you can argue that second Spurs chip on the back end of that the Heat run, the second Spurs chip on the back end of the Heat run, or was that second?
Yeah,
was that a second? That was first chip.
Yeah, when they went back to back.
Yeah, you know what I meant. Sorry, Kawhi, I don't think Kawhi was a top 5 player yet or a top 10 player yet, And I even think like this season, as much as the Heat weren't expected to be in the finals and whatnot, I think Jimmy Butler can kind of impersonate a top 5 to 10 player for like a 4-week stretch.
I think when he needs to be, he is top player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like he like impersonates it. It's like not a perpetual thing, right? But like, I think he doesn't play every game like a top 5 player, but I think he played most of the games like a top 5 player. Like they were losing games, he was dropping 40. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think those situations can happen, but those are such like unique situations. Like if you don't have like Steph, Giannis, Embiid, LeBron, even Embiid, arguable, etc. Like it's going to be really tough. Like everything else has to be going perfectly. And you also have to get lucky. And like you guys have been like one of the more unlucky teams like there's been, I feel like the Vucevic trade happens that season. You guys don't make the playoff. That becomes Franz Wagner. It's like, okay, that looks terrible.
Right.
Like Lonzo, great signing, like gets hurt. It's like, okay, that sucks. It's like none of these moves have ever have kind of like worked out the way you guys would have hoped. Unfortunately.
No, they've been, they weren't miscalculations though. Like Vooch looked so much better in Orlando than he did for the Bulls really ever. That doesn't mean he can't be like a serviceable, decent big man who can shoot okay. But he just doesn't like shoot well from in the paint. Like I have no problem with how he shoots from outside of the arc. Like he shoots 33, 35% maybe, but like inside, like near the basket, he should be shooting way better. But I think that, and if you look at that last team to win without a top 5 player, let me see, Heat, yep, okay. Mavericks had Dirk. Yep.
Yeah, Dirk. I mean, that Spurs 2014 or 2013.
If you look at that Pistons team, they had a very definite sort of identity.
Yep.
And their identity was, we're going to fucking dog you on defense. And you're not going to, there's going to be no easy baskets. And I don't even know if that formula is really possible in the NBA anymore.
I mean, I still think you have to be like one of the top defensive teams now, because I think playoff basketball ends up slowing down like pace wise so much more that like I think regular season, sure, like you can have a bad defense and be a top 5 regular season team, whatever. But like I think over and over again we see those like this is an existential basketball discussion too. But like over and over we see those teams that like don't have consistent defenses flopping in the playoffs. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons the Warriors never really flopped in the playoffs when they were on their run. They had a top 3 defense every single year, even though they had Steph Curry. So
Right.
and
Yeah.
Kevin Durant,
I mean,
etc.
it's hard to say. I don't know. And I think that's more of a coaching matter. But if you look at everyone else, like the Nuggets, did they have an incredible defense? Like, not necessarily. It was a good defense. Don't get me wrong. The Bucks did have a great one. The Lakers, when they won,
Yeah,
they didn't have like an unstoppable defense.
I think Anthony Davis like single handedly makes you one of the better ones. But I mean, they had Caruso too. And
True at the time.
LeBron was a younger LeBron.
Even on top of all that, though, you make a great point about like the identity in general. Like the Pistons had a great identity. Even that Spurs team, like passing was like their bread and butter. And
Yeah.
with the Bulls, it's sort of like, okay, all those factors aside, what's the infrastructure? And I think like your brightest star is Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to build off that.
Yeah. You need every other role to be like that perfect person, right? You need that Ben and Rasheed Wallace in the paint. Like nothing's going past them. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
But I think even that team would get beat by like Golden State today because they're built to defend the paint, not as much the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
Valid. Okay, well, we've beat up on the Bulls enough just right there in the last like 5 minutes. So let's double down. Do we have worst case scenarios? Anthony, start us off.
I think the big things are like all these guys come back down to earth. Like DeRozan, his age catches up to him and he has a bad season. You can't trade him anymore. And then Vooch, like hopefully his game ages well, but like what if he continues to kind of struggle offensively like we've seen the last couple of years? So I think those things are worst case scenario. Obviously, like we'll take Lonzo out of this and then you guys miss the play-in, I guess. But you kind of still like are good enough to compete. So it's like very frustrating and you're tearing your hair out every like Tuesday night at my apartment or I'm over at yours and we're watching the Bulls play and like hanging around like down 5 against the Bucks or something. You're like, they're right there. And then it just happens the whole year. That's what I see. What do you see, Max?
Kind of the same thing, to be honest. I do think I am a little bit more positive. I think at worst, you guys are probably the 10th seed, like play in contention. I still think there's a little too much talent here to be like totally shit. Like I don't see that.
I agree.
Happening. But I do think like the nightmare situation is like if Vucevic and DeRozan hit a wall and then like they're terrible, as much as that's the nightmare situation, then the trades would come. So then like you're kind of out of this hole where you're kind of mid now. That would suck because you probably wouldn't get as much value as if you just traded them now. But like, I don't think that's even that bad of a scenario. But if this team plays out as it should, I really don't see this team being worse than like 39 and like 43, and like probably 10th seed competing for the play-ins, probably miss it again, like miss the playoffs again, and then ownership comes back and tries to talk the fans into the team because they were in contention for a play-in. Like, I think that's true worst case.
Yeah. I mean, it's no stranger to me that Jerry Reinsdorf does not care about winning. He wants teams to be good enough that people show up, but he doesn't care. He thrives on hope for them and the White Sox, really. But I think if you're talking about worst case scenario, I think we're fucking staring at it. We got like Lonzo doesn't come back. The team can't really quite find the chemistry. And even if we can't find the chemistry, we still have Zach LaVine and DeMar putting up 25 points a night. You know what I mean? And I don't think you can bet on Vucevic or DeMar just all of a sudden like being horrible. You know what I mean? Like maybe they get a little bit worse, right? We're not assuming that they're gonna get better, right? But if assuming they get a little bit worse, I think maybe we go like 37 and what would that be? 40. 45. Maybe we probably missed the play-in. I know what it's like to be stuck. The Bulls have never been like the worst team in the league. We were pretty bad for a long time, but somehow we ended up never at the bottom, and we never got a good pick because of it. 3 years in a row, we pulled the 7 pick. That's how we got Kobe White. And you look at who we got from the 7 pick; it's also quite disappointing. I think Patrick Williams was a 7 pick. Patrick Williams, Kobe White was a 7 pick, and the bull we traded to Orlando, Wendell Carter Jr. Was a 7 pick. They all came sort of right in a row there, and I think Patrick Williams might still have big upside, and we re-signed Kobe to a 12-year deal. But I think at that point, like DeMar's contract is up, so it's not like we're stuck with a fat contract and we can't trade him. I think like best case, worst case scenario is we re-sign him for more money that he's worth for more years than we should be. But I don't think Arturas Karnisovas will do that. I don't know. Worst case scenario is we slowly digress, and really the worst case scenario is that the team can't find chemistry without Lonzo, and they end up hating each other. And I feel like you can really tell when a team is like plays well together and like enjoys it, and people like go to the games, even if they're not amazing and they're still fun to watch. The Bulls, even when we're bad, like the last 2 years, even when we lose, we're still a fun team to watch. You know what I mean? Zach LaVine is one of the most electric players. Alex Caruso, also very exciting to watch. So I think worst case scenario is Lonzo doesn't come back, we lose team chemistry, and the players end up having resentment toward each other because they think they can win, but they're not. I think they need to be more, at least somewhat realistic, and sort of understand like, okay, we may not be contenders right now, but we're still going to play like we could be, and maybe we'll make a move in the off season. But I think we're like one top 10 signing away from being, legitimate contenders with our current roster.
Well, let's go right into it then. What's your actual prediction for the season? We'll start with you this time.
My actual prediction is that Lonzo doesn't come back. We sort of find a way with these 3 point guards that we have to sort of pull off a very mid-season 41-41. I think that's where we're destined to be, is mid as fuck.
Wow. Rudy, I literally in my notes I wrote 41-41, the mid remains mid.
I'm a Chicago sports fan. There's one thing I know how to be is realistic.
Dude, you got that kid in Chicago for the Blackhawks, though.
Yeah, they're playing right now, I think, in the preseason game.
Regular season just started. It's a bit ahead.
We're losing 1-2.
Well, okay. Funnily enough, actually, Anthony shows me his predictions before this, and I also had 41-41. So here we are with the same exact predictions.
Wow.
I just think like this team's probably too good to be like totally ass, which is kind of the worst case. Like, because you'd like them to be ass so they could blow it up, but like be it.
If someone gets injured, then we could be truly ass.
Yeah.
I don't know. The blowing up part, because then it's not even fun to watch them. You know what I mean? If we're mid and we have a chance to even make the playoffs, like, that's a win in my book in some cases, making the playoffs. I know my team's not going to win the championship, so it's nice to just be able to see them win, right? It shouldn't be all about, if you conscribe yourself to the Boston sports mindset where your team's supposed to win every single game and you're supposed to win the championship every year in all 4 sports, you're going to end up upset. You know what I mean? I'm more realistic. I know what it's like to be a Chicago sports fan, and I'd be fine if they made the playoffs and I got to see them play well and I got to see some exciting games in the course of it. I can dream that they could be great, but that's probably not going to happen.
That's like the most real answer we've ever gotten on the podcast, I think. Because I'm not going to lie, I do think Anthony and I also, because I kind of subscribe to ring culture, to be honest. Kind of like, if we're not trying to win a chip, what are we doing sort of thing. So that's like a good perspective. I mean, we're both fans of big market teams that have done a good amount of winning in the past like 5 to 10 years.
You're
That's
spoiled, is what.
yeah, exactly. Yes, we're spoiled. Great way to put it. But yeah, so that I mean that makes sense. I mean, if that's what you guys are going for, I mean, I guess we're all here
No,
kind of
obviously that's not what
agreeing.
we're going for. That's
No,
that's
yeah, but
that's okay. That's
if that's
serviceable.
okay,
I mean,
yeah, if
I'm
that's
not going to be
okay,
upset if we make the playoffs. You know what I mean?
yeah, of course,
Um,
yeah.
but
But I mean, here we are. I think we're all kind of predicting that you guys are going to go 41-41, have a playing game of some sort. I, to be honest, this kind of goes into the hot take section. I think DeRozan and Levine are really good. Like, I actually think league wide, those two guys just don't get enough shine because all their peripheral pieces, it's kind of jumbled up. And then Vucevic, as much as he does stretch the floor, he's not like a crazy good like defensive presence or something like that compared to a lot of his other center counterparts in the East. So
no,
they have a lot of pressure on them, like to perform constantly, right? And
yeah,
I
they
think
do.
Levine and DeRozan probably could be the second best players in their own right on a championship team with an A+ guy. Like if you put
I
Zach
don't know
Levine,
about DeMar anymore, um, because even he struggles with defense, and I don't know. I just feel like his role on a team is an outdated role. I just don't find that. I don't think, at least not in like the top two spots. You know what I mean? Like he could have been like, oh, he could be like that Michael Porter Jr. For the Nuggets kind of person, but I don't think he's a top two player on any championship team.
I could see the math. There's my counterpoint. I can see the math because Wiggins 2 years ago was the second best player in championship team in the like finals. I mean, maybe not for the whole playoff run. You had obviously some series it was Clay, some series it was Looney, some series it was Dre. When it came down to the finals and probably the Western Conference Finals as well, he was probably the second best player.
Yeah, I agree, but he's also a better defender and a better rebounder than DeMar.
Yeah, but then I would say DeMar's is a better scorer. So in a perfect
True.
world, in a
True.
perfect situation, DeMar a lot more so than Levine. But I think you could almost argue Levine is as good, if not better, of a player than Jamal Murray, and that is a spicy take. But I think
Um,
Levine has incredible scoring potential, especially if
I
he was actually playing off someone.
I think he's a better scorer. Yeah. Defensively, I think they're roughly similar. But I think Jamal Murray's playmaking ability as a point guard is definitely. Yeah, I don't know if he's even is he if they're really like that. They're different players and they
Yeah,
fit different roles on their teams. But I think I would probably pay them the same amount in from a GM's perspective.
Anthony, you have any opinions?
Um, one hot take I had, which I don't also know. I don't have any hot takes about the Bulls. They're all just tepid takes. This is tepid take section. I'm
Room
something
temperature.
pretty.
They're pretty reasonable. Like nobody's like, oh, the Bulls are going to be contenders this year. I
Right.
never heard that.
Right. I think something you brought up. You made a good point earlier about like big names. And I do unfortunately think the Bulls are just kind of living in like the big name franchise like past with like MJ, D Rose. Now we're trying to again with DeMar and Zach Levine. And I don't get it. I wish they would cut it out. I wish they would
Maybe
just
big names. You need big names to win. We talked about that.
well, right, but you don't have any big names and you're trying it with DeMar and
Oh, we're
Levine.
trying to force the big
And
names.
it's just not working. Like I'm honestly surprised you guys didn't try to go for Russell Westbrook a couple seasons ago just to get him in the door. Like
I'm glad we
that's
didn't.
I'm glad y'all didn't too. Um, that was my one hot take. But something else you said was about the entertainment value. Is I'm gonna throw it back like 5 years.
Mhm.
Remember that team with Jimmy, D Wade, and Rondo?
Yeah.
You guys scared the hell out of us, and you guys almost beat us. And honestly, you should have beaten us if not for Rondo getting injured. What do you remember that team?
I remember that team. I didn't really follow that year. What year was that? 2017,
2017.
2018, before we traded Jimmy. And I love Jimmy. And I still do. I think he's a great player. I think he's a goofy guy. Um, but dude, we were in no position to win anything at that point as a franchise. our GMs were Gar Forman and John Paxson. I have a little insider information about Gar Forman. I think John Paxson's a moron, but he was a good player, and I think he's an okay guy. Gar Forman is an absolute scumbag. I know this because one of my family friends like lived across the street from him. He had like he married a woman who had like a kid with special needs, and that he had a pit bull or something that like didn't get along with the kid or something, and just locked the dog in the garage, muzzled it, just didn't like put it up for adoption or send it to a pound, like something humane or something like that. Like left it in the garage and muzzled it, and would like feed it, but like it's just like this dog would bark all the time and like so mistreated. Like he was a scumbag. Like I think at one point Jimmy's agent was like, I know drug dealers that have more integrity than Gar Forman. And it's true. Like we were never gonna win. Like everybody hated it. There were billboards in Chicago that said fire Gar Pax for years. They hired their friend Jim Boylston. He's not a basketball coach. He's not a coach of any sort. I don't even know what he can do, honestly. He can't do anything is really what it is. He's a useless person.
That was the team that Markkinen was on that team, and they like walked out on him in practice or something. The Jim Boylan teams, those where they were doing 3.5 hour practices or something crazy.
Markkinen was like good when we first got him, and then we sort of tried to turn him into a spot up shooter as a power forward, even though like he had like a great finish, like good around the hoop, like tall as fuck. And now he's an all-star, and yeah, we fucking blew that up because we didn't have a coach at the time. You know what I mean? Like he looked like ass, and now the Jazz have him on like a pretty good deal, if I'm not mistaken. But
what was that?
We weren't in any position to win at that point. We were in definitely better position to win 2 years ago in 2021. I think if Lonzo didn't get injured, I think that the Bulls could have really made a run at the championship.
Yeah,
now we're in decline is the issue. Even if we got Lonzo back, I don't think we have it. I don't think we have what it takes anymore.
It's tough. I mean, so in that trade, so the Cavs acquired Laurie first and then did a side trade, 3-team deal. And then Cleveland trades Larry Nance to Portland. Bulls received Derek Jones Jr. and Blazers lottery protected 2022 first. Who was that pick?
2022.
It was lottery protected, so they didn't even get it.
It probably didn't even convey.
Yeah, didn't get it. Damn.
So Lauri Markkinen for Derek Jones, who is now on the. He signed somewhere. I don't even remember.
Yeah, he signed somewhere else. He was okay. He was just a rim runner though. Lauri Markkinen is getting paid $17 million as an all-star.
Oh,
should have been all NBA over Julius Randle.
We signed that deal with him. We signed him at 4 years for $67 million. And if we had just held on to him,
crazy. And that's a piece where like now we're having different conversations. Now if you have Laurie, right. The thing is Laurie wasn't going to be this on this team. That's like
he wasn't going to be that on Jim Boylan's team. Mm-hmm. He could have been who he was supposed to be on this new team with. And I love Billy Donovan. I think he's a great coach, and he like creates a really good environment.
He was great with the Thunder.
Yeah, he was great with the Thunder.
Built that up.
And I get like a vibe that he understands basketball. Like anyone next to Jim Boylan is like an upgrade. Really anyone. I would take Stan Van Gundy over Jim Boylan.
Unreal. I have another hot take. And I kind of have a hot take that I don't think Pat Williams and Kobe White are going to end up being that good if DeRozan and Levine stick. I think offensively, they don't have the capacity to develop, considering if you guys are competing and trying to win games in perpetuity, like it's going to be really tough to give, Pat Williams, who's played 150 NBA games, the chance to mess up, which a lot of these young guys need. Like most really top end young guys are good instantaneously or develop slowly. And like, it's really hard to get those guys who are good instantaneously, right? So, like, I don't think Kobe White and Pat Williams, like, it's not even their fault. Like, I think they're pretty good. They just don't really have a chance
to, like, get the opportunity. I think Kobe White sort of has had the opportunity. I think he's He's a decent shooting guard. I agree though. I don't think Patrick Williams has gotten the opportunity to really like make those mistakes and like develop that confidence and be like the player he's potentially to be. But no, I've seen games where Kobe White takes 15 shots a game.
He did have the green light. You are
He
right.
had the green light. And I think he's gotten better undeniably, but and I don't think he's reached his ceiling even yet, but I don't think he's going to be a superstar. I don't think he's going to be like what's his like best case scenario, like Zach LaVine at shooting guard, you know what I mean? I don't think he's going to reach that point, you know what I mean? Zach LaVine was more athletic at his age than Kobe White is now.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we can hope for Patrick Williams. We can hope for him to develop, but like those cases are so like it's like Kawhi. Like the only player who's ever developed while the team was winning and then contributed to winning was Kawhi. Like in recent history, pretty much, I feel like.
And that's easier to do when you have, the GOAT as your coach.
And Tim Duncan and Parker and Ginobili.
Yeah.
I mean, the Warriors tried to do it, and then we won a chip with none of our draft picks contributing whatsoever. Like that's just like an extreme example.
Dunk it up.
Anyways, moving on. I have another fun comparison.
Okay.
The 2009 Bulls finished 41-41. Okay, this is a team that had, I believe, 7 guys who averaged double digits points per game. And this team had Ben Gordon, John Salmons, Derrick Rose, young rookie Derrick Rose, Luol Deng, Drew Gooden, Larry Hughes, Brad Miller, Tyrus Thomas, Andres Nocioni. All guys that I think a lot of people know their names. A lot of really good.
I don't know about that.
Solid.
How many of those names did you recognize?
I mean, I recognize
them. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that there are maybe
we're bad sample
guys that are recognizable in that group.
Well, at the time, though, I mean, there's 6 guys on this team scoring 12 points per game or more, So I think like pretty solid team. Like I would say a lot of solid role players, but in the end, this team is pretty average. But they have Derrick Rose.
How many players are scoring 20 points a game in that group?
Ben Gordon, 21. Ben Gordon, 21.
Ben Gordon was chucking up shots like he thought he was Kobe Bryant. I remember watching him play. He really thought he was Kobe Bryant. He was throwing up like 30 shots a game out there. He was like 12 of them.
He was chucking them. But
what was his field goal percentage that year?
45%. So that's pretty good.
But better than I recall, honestly.
He should have shot more threes, though. That was the thing with Ben Gordon. He always shot like too many mid-range shots, and he was shooting 40% from 3, but no one at the time was like, you should shoot 9 threes. They're like, you should shoot 4. I don't know. Yeah. But my comparison is just kind of like, I think that 2009 team, a lot of role players, a lot of guys you like, and not saying Zach LaVine or DeRozan are role players, but Ben Gordon wasn't a role player either. He probably wasn't as good as Zach LaVine, but the difference between these two teams is
I think Ben Gordon was a role player. I thought he was a shooting guard. That's all he was. He didn't play defense well. He was a shooting guard. He shot the ball well, decently enough, and he would take a lot of shots. I think he was one of the most quintessential shooting guards that's ever played.
Valid, but I mean, he was scoring 21 a game, and at the time, without point inflation, regardless. Right. The difference between these two teams is like that team, as much as it might have looked like it was in the dead end, it has Derrick Rose. They have that one guy, and although Derrick Rose in his rookie year was a rookie of the year, he wasn't like a LeBron level rookie yet or something like that. He was scoring like 15, 16 a game, and the difference between
you could tell he was. Based on his highlights, you're like, all right, this guy is the real deal.
Yeah, of course. And he wins MVP like literally the next year, if I'm not mistaken, right? But
2 or 3 years after that, we actually have like a team that, if you look at it now, we're like, oh my God, how did this team not win? With Carlos Boozer, Joakim Noah, Derrick Rose, Luol Deng,
Omer Asik,
and Jimmy Butler was on that team too. That was one of his first years. You look at that team, we're like, I look back at it now, I'm like, oh my God, we could have been contenders.
Y'all could have had one, I think.
I think we could have.
And I mean that 2009 team forced the Celtics to 7 games.
Oh yeah, that was the year. Wait, no, was it that year or was it a previous the next year? We were the 7th seed and we forced 7 in the first round.
Yeah, that was us.
That was 2009.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could kind of see the writing on the wall. You guys were kind of on this upswing, which is probably the biggest difference I would say from this current team is that like there was hope kind of on the horizon. Patrick Williams has always been an intriguing player. I love him in fantasy because he'll like come in and plug and play when he has his minutes. He just doesn't get those minutes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we do have we have some young players that could be dealt possibly or who could who are decent players. I want to say that they're going to get significantly better, but it's hard to say at this point. All we can do is hope. I don't see the hype in them like I do when I look at the Pelicans. When I look at the Pelicans, I'm like, this team is actually a contending team. And they're young as hell. Like they could really go the distance if they weren't so plagued with injuries every year.
Do you have like a vision or like an idea of where you want ideally or where you realistically see this team like 3 to 4 years?
The Bulls, yes, I think that in this off season, I would like to keep DeMar. I think DeMar still could. Part of me is like we can keep him. He still has value. Part of me is like he's not even worth a spot. In 2 years, he may not even be worth the spot. He's getting older. He wears those leg braces like every game now. You know what I mean? I don't know. I would still sign him for like 10 to 15 maybe this coming year. But I think that best case scenario is we need like a young big man who is going to fill that paint, who's going to be that tall guy who's able to score in the paint consistently with some post moves. Best case scenarios, I told you we get Anthony Davis. But that might be a tall order. Although, he's 1-1 now, maybe he's open to coming home at this point.
LeBron is a player option. He can leave whenever. So
yeah, LeBron, I think, has won his last championship at this point.
Now that's a good take.
I mean, it's probably true mathematically.
Probably true. He's still good, but a good manager isn't managing his team. You know what I mean? Frankly, a good manager has never managed his team. He's always tried to be the guy to manage his own team, and not even really though. The only time somebody else had a chance to like manage a team that he was on was the Heat, and they won 2 in 3 years. I think his ego is too enormous to give up the fact that he might not be the smartest basketball mind in the room.
Ooh, that's spicy. I mean,
yeah.
If you're right,
my family's from Cleveland. Okay, I grew up rooting for LeBron. I'm like, this guy is the savior. This guy's the man. And then he left, and everyone was like, burned his jersey and stuff. And then he moved back, and I saw how my parents and my grandparents just forgave him. They're like, oh, he's back. Everything's okay now. Like, oh my God. And at that point, he wasn't cool anymore. He was like corny as hell and really not like a guy you'd like, want to watch in an interview. There was a time where he was, but that time had passed at that point.
Why aren't you a Cleveland sports fan then?
I'll root my parents are from there. And I'll root for, Cleveland over other teams or the Browns over other teams. But I don't know. I grew up a lot in Ohio. Like I spent this past weekend, I was in Cleveland for a wedding. But I've been most of my family's from Columbus, so I'm like Ohio State till I die. That's always been my college team. I've been Tulane now, but yeah, it's when I moved to New Orleans, that I sort of adopted the Pelicans, who were getting good. And I've been to way more Pelicans games than I have Bulls games, in all honesty, because the tickets were so cheap there. Even when the Bulls stink, the tickets are $60. Pelicans stink, $8 tickets. Pelicans are good, $15 tickets. It's a whole different ball game.
And I'm in DC, honestly, and like the Wizards stink, $2 tickets. And then there's no like second part to that. It's just like $2 tickets.
That's it. That's all there is.
Yeah.
Damn. Well, Rudy, we're definitely going to have you on with a Pelicans perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about your first memories as a Bulls fan? What's the story of you becoming like a Bulls lifer?
When I was growing up, it was my first memories of it was sort of Ben Wallace, Ben Gordon, Kirk Heinrich.
Oh, he was good. Kirk Heinrich.
Yeah. The first game I saw of the Bulls, I think it was like some like Park District thing. It was like 2005, 2006. We're playing the Denver Nuggets, and that was you remember who was on that team? Here's a quick question. You remember what like
Jermaine O'Neal
was on that team? Huh?
Andre Miller.
Andre Miller. He was on that team, but no, it wasn't him. That was
Marcus Camby, Melo.
Jermaine O'Neal.
It was Carmelo Anthony. I remember him just dropping the Bulls like lights out. It was a spectacle to see. But I was a Bulls fan, and but I wasn't sort of like die hard. And then I remember like the draft. I think it was in like sixth grade, so it must have been like 2007, 2008 was when D Rose was drafted. And I remember I'm like, we got the first pick somehow. We were an okay team, but we somehow pulled like it was like a 1-2% chance that the Bulls were gonna get the first pick, and we did. And I was like, oh, we should get Michael Beasley. I think he's better. Like, oh, he's power forward. He looked really good in college. And
Lefty.
Not a day goes by where I don't thank whoever the general manager was at the time for picking Derrick Rose. Because in like a year or two, he was my favorite player, and probably still will always be my favorite player. I think he's got the heart of a lion, and there's really no one who I like sort of look up to as like a player and someone with like integrity in like the sports world as Derrick Rose. Like the fact that he was he's a hometown hero. He was so upset when the Bulls traded him. I'm like, how are we not re-signing this man every time his contract is up for whatever he wants? Like, he wants to be, retire as a Bull, like, undeniably. He still is a good leader. He still has some level of utility, he just got signed by the Grizzlies, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why the Bulls didn't try to sign him for the same amount. I think he's the kind of guy that like Bulls fans really go nuts over, like through and through, like the most probably of any player other than Michael Jordan. That's how much he means to like Chicago, and it's crazy to have like that player that's from the city and cares so much, and then becomes the MVP of your franchise. But yeah, once those few years played out, like it was incredible. I still when I watch him getting injured, those 2-3 times or whatever, like I'll cry. I will tear up when I see those videos every time. It doesn't matter how late it is after, but it still breaks my heart to see like what we could have been and sort of how upset he became as a result of it.
Damn. That's tough. I mean, literally the most devastating like injury for a star player probably over the last like 10 to 15 years. Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Probably over the last 30 years.
Yeah. So heartbreaking. Like went from MVP to, and he was still good after the first injury, and then
downhill.
Breaks my heart.
Dude, the bank shot 3 against LeBron, and like y'all just going back in the mid 2000s, like
baby.
Series.
I still have that seared in my memory.
Damn. Yeah, stone cold.
Yeah.
Naughty.
As you should.
Beast.
Rudy, any other Bulls talk or takeaway or NBA in general?
I don't know. The Bulls, there's not much. I will say that, I like our GM now. I like our assistant GM. I like our coach. I really think that, it's really a matter of we made some gambles on players, and it was to sort of a win now thing. We weren't investing in our future, and those gambles didn't really pan out in terms of injuries plagued us, and now we're sort of paying the price of it. We're sort of a receding franchise at this point. But I know, I think that I don't think Jerry Reinsdorf, ever really wants to win. I think that he should be. I don't know how you oust an owner, but he sucks, and maybe we need a general strike of all Bulls games. We got to really make it hurt his pockets, and maybe he'll sell the team to the city or something like. We can all buy stocks, and it'd be like the Green Bay Packers. We can all have a say in who gets hired on the Bulls. That's the dream scenario. I don't think that's realistic, but.
We are officially starting it now on Spittin Hoops. Get Reinsdorf out.
Nobody go to a Bulls game. Save your money. Save that money so we can buy the Bulls and make all the decisions.
You don't have to watch DeRozan go 10 for 20 with 0 3-point attempts.
Yeah. I don't know. He's still exciting to watch, though, I got to say. And remember that there were 2 games, like, back-to-back where he hit that, like, game-winning three. And I'm like, oh, my God, the Bulls are so back. We weren't back. But there's still, you know what I mean? There's still a fun team to watch, even if we're not even a top 6 or 7 team in the East. We're still a fun team to watch.
Year on year, honestly. Like, the Bulls, like you said, at least, like, before, like, with the relevance and, like, trying to win, I feel like you guys haven't really bottomed out in a long time. I mean, you guys had kind of in those transition years.
No, we bottomed out. The
Kobe White, Wendell Carter transition years was like 2-3 years. I think
between trading Jimmy. You're right. It was only like 2 or 3 years. But like you got to see the players that were on this roster at this time. It was
they were terrible.
Denzel Valentine was starting. It was,
yes,
oh my God, John Lemon, who actually had a couple of good games. But it was bleak.
Atrocious. Yeah.
It was bleak.
Bruno Caboclo, do you remember that guy? You guys
I don't remember that.
Or was that no, that was Toronto. You guys signed a center that I'm blanking out. It was for like a 3-year deal in that offseason where the cap spiked and he played like 20 games and he was out of the league. I'm blanking out on him. I'll think of his name.
I think it might have been Bruno, bro.
Really?
That sounds very familiar. I remember seeing a looking Brazilian dude on
Tony Kukoc.
Yo, Tony Kukoc. Gotta bring it back, man.
What is do you remember Tomas Satoransky? Those days?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. It was Cristiano Felicio.
Defender, honestly.
Cristiano Felicio. That was who it was.
Cristiano Felicio. Yeah, he was a big oaf. Some of these players are like too hard to hate. They're just like this guy should be like the 13th man on a team. Denzel Valentine I hated because he thought he was the man. He just stunk.
Yeah.
He remains a punchline in Chicago to this day.
That's hilarious. Well, I guess we'll wrap it there. Rudy, thank you. We appreciate it. As always.
Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Yes, sir.
Nobody ever wants to talk about the Bulls. Everyone wants to talk about the Celtics here. So it's nice to get have some Bulls talk going on.
For sure. Anthony, any final takeaways?
Glad we were able to talk some Bulls too. Hopefully it was a bit of a therapy session for you.
It has been.
Very good. And to our many listeners, subscribers, viewers, passionate fans, this will be up soon enough. And until then, we'll just be chilling here, spitting hoops.
Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button. You already know.
Come on, let's get Jerry out. Let's get Jerry out.
Like Spittin Hoops.